because sometimes it didn't happen. But this recording is going to be about how to set up a file for the, this is called a click and cut machine. They call it the KNK. And if you're getting some cut vinyl done, this is going to be a demonstration. The initial first part is about cut vinyl. So let's say I want to have a, maybe you've ordered a portfolio and it's an 11 by 17 and you need a fairly sizable graphic on it. Now my cutter right now, my cutting surface is 15 inches by 15 inches. So I'm going to do this in units of inches. Now, can you go longer than 15? You can. 15 is as wide as I can go on the cutter, but you can go longer than 15. I know a couple people have talked about maybe printing from that roll of black that I have, so I just need to get a longer cut map. So I am capable of doing longer than 15, but only on one side. So for now, I'm just going to do it 15 by 15. If you're not using the whole entire surface area, you could make this a smaller file. It's not a problem. I'm going to turn on my rulers. Now, one of the things that many of you might do is maybe your name is done in typography. So I'm going to put some typography out here. Right now it's pretty small, so let me increase the size of that. And I'm certainly not going to be using this typeface, the default Myriad Pro. So let me just find any old typeface. Now, not all type is the same. Something like this, which is called Mistral, it may be a little difficult to cut, and the reason why is because of the details. So I'm going to zoom in on this, and you can see that things like this may end up being a problem for the cutter. Also, things like this, you guys, oops, it's gone, might be a problem, but you can see there's also, if I zoom in, you can see that there's some areas that could be smooth between letters. So this is not always a typeset it and go kind of thing. So anything that's got wavy lines or especially some cutouts of the counters, it can do it. It's just not going to do it as well maybe as you might think. So I'm going to actually choose a different typeface because Mistral is not really my go-to font for much of anything unless I'm designing something for a jazz musician. Oh, Papyrus. We all love that one. Oh my gosh. Can you imagine trying for the vinyl cutter to try to get that accurate? That's going to be a little tough. Okay, so guys, I'm not going to guarantee that my vinyl cutter in really small letters can handle this kind of detail. In larger letters, possibly, but in real small stuff, maybe not. So you know, you can give me something and I'll see if it works, but we might be pushing it. So I'm going to go with something a little bit more firm. There we go. That's pretty firm and pretty strong. Not that you all have to design with, you know, really super firm, strong letters here. Excuse me, I'm using my shift key and nothing's working. There we go. Oh, for Pete's sake. Let's try that again. There we go, almost. Why is it not doing it in proportion? And I'm having a heck of a time today. Well, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to scale this down. Maybe I want this to be 15 inches wide. So let me just scale it down using the scale tool by telling it to scale pretty small. Let's do about a 50%. There we go. Now naturally you guys would want to kern. Illustrator does have kerning capability. You want to bring up your character control panel. And there's two VAs. One has a V and an A with a slash in it, and right now it's set on auto kerning. The slash is kerning. This one is tracking. Tracking is the adjustment of space between all characters. So we don't want to necessarily track this out. I mean, you might want to as a design choice, but you certainly want to kern it, and auto is not the best way. You want to use optical kerning and then go from there. So if there's something that the optical is not taking care of really well, you might go in and manually kern between letter pairs, such as between this B and the E. I might kern there just a smidge, take some of that space out. Whoops, I'm going the wrong way. And do some manual adjustments to tighten some stuff up. So optical kerning is good, but it's not foolproof. It's not 100% exactly maybe what you might want. Now, just for the sake of time, I'm going to stop kerning this. You cannot give me an Illustrator file with your name that is still in the typeface like this. This has to be converted to outlines. Everything has to be converted to outlines for this to work on the cutter. So in order to convert type to outlines, you would choose the type with the selection tool, which is the black arrow tool, and you would go to type, and you would, where is it? Create outlines. Type, create outlines. I use keyboard shortcuts, so it's hard for me to find these after a while. Shift Control O. Now that is now considered a vector object. Now I'm going to go to the Layers panel, and I want to show you what it's done. Let me rip it off here. The cutter doesn't like everything all separate into their own letters like this, okay? So you can't have everything as separate compound paths and all grouped up. It needs one layer, one compound path. So what you need to do for this to work on a cutter is you need to select this and go to Object, Compound Path, and Make. Now it has one layer, one path. Now you may want to, unfortunately it filled it with white. You want to fill this typically with black. So I'm going to do a default fill stroke, flip it, and then take the stroke off. Okay, so this is filled with black, not stroked with white. You don't want any stroke on here. So it's still a compound path. Now if you're doing any sort of artwork, maybe like I showed you guys in class, a business card that was a custom business card kind of cut. So by the way, if I click with the rectangular tool, I can type in how wide I want my business card. Business cards are 3.5 inches wide typically and 2 inches tall. Okay, that is typical business card size. Now I'm not going to have this on the same cut file as my name for my portfolio because that's two different materials. So I would create a completely different document for this business card. So I'm going to actually cut that, create a new document, 15 by 15, hit OK, and paste it. Now you can make it, now the paper, you don't actually, on this, don't make it 15 by 15 because the paper you're going to be printing on is only 12 by 18. And really of that, you only have about 11.5 inches surface. So I'm going to go ahead and do 11.5 by 17.5. I'm going to go ahead and edit my artboard, double clicking on the artboard tool here. And I'm going to tell this to be, let's say, we know that we have 18-inch wide paper, or excuse me, 12-inch wide paper and 18-inch tall paper. And so I'm going to make the artboard 12 by 18. So on a business card, if you're doing a custom cut on that, you might want to do a 12 by 18 sheet. Now keep in mind you can't go right to the edge, it can't print to the edge, so I'm going to put this somewhere up here. So let's say I have a folded business card and it's got a funky shape to it, or I have just in general a business card with a funky shape, that's fine. Again, I'm not going to be using my cutter to cut out rectangular business cards. You can forget it. It's a waste of my blade. You're going to use your own and a ruler. But if it's a funky custom shape, then I can maybe deal with it. Now let's say mine is a folded business card. So here's maybe the bottom part of it. I'm going to hold down the Alt key and drag this up, and that would be the top part of it. And perhaps I wanted this to have a little bit showing through at the bottom. Maybe my name or some other information is going to be printed down here that shows all the time. And perhaps I want this to have some sort of shape to it. I've tried lace. It's too shapely. It's too detailed. So this can't be too awfully detailed. Now, in addition, I also will need what is called a score line. So I'm going to draw a line across the center of this while I have the center indicated. That's a score line. Let's go ahead and stroke it. Fill with none. Okay, so I have a score line, which it'll end up being on its own layer. And I have the top half and the bottom half of a business card. Now, I'm going to go ahead and alter the shape of this card. Maybe I want it to be kind of wavy. So I'm going to just throw in kind of a wavy pattern right here. and it's not going to be all that great. Actually, I like odds better than even. So let me start out again, and let me go ahead and get this I want 3 little waves. I may have to reduce this in size when I'm done drawing it because I'm just getting too crazy here. And I'm not being real accurate, so I would be if I were doing this design for real. So let me get this roughly in the position I want it and resize it. Yeah, this is not exactly accurate, but you know, we can live with it. I'm like, okay, that's where my wave goes, right about there. Now what I'll need to do is I'll need to minus this selection from the selection behind it. There's a number of ways to do that. Pathfinder is such a fabulous thing, so I'm going to go bring it up. Window, Pathfinder. Oops, not Navigator. Window, Pathfinder. And I have both of these objects selected. And one kind of unites them. The other one minuses the front. I'm going to click on that. I'm like, oh, nope, that wasn't it. The other one intersects. I'm like, nope, that wasn't it either. So some of these work and some of them don't. So I'm just kind of going through and figuring out which ones do. Oftentimes I end up using the Pathfinder divide thing if there's something that's complicated. So I divide it. If there's nothing that is a one-stop little thing, I'll divide it, and then I'll get rid of all of the paths that I don't need. All the little extras. So all that is now gone. Now, before you can send this to me, you have to do a few things, and I'm not doing these for you. So if you don't send your files correctly, then I can't help you. What I'm going to do is I'm going to first take the score line and put it on its own layer, and I'm going to name that layer score and put it on that layer. Turn that layer off. And all of this entire thing for this business card shape needs to be one compound path. So I'm going to merge it all by clicking on the shape mode and click on the unite. You can either do unite or merge, either one will work. And I usually do get rid of any excessive anchor points. So if you have more anchor points, like for straight lines, I don't need all those anchor points. I'm going to get rid of them. It's less math the computer has to do. So I got rid of any extra anchor points that didn't really matter. And let me close Pathfinder, or move Pathfinder. And I also need to make sure that it's not just a path. This needs to be a compound path so that the machine can cut it. It cannot just be regular paths. So once I've merged all this together and everything is one solid object, I go to Object, Compound Path, and Make. That is a compound path. It's ready to go. I'm going to turn that off, and I'm going to turn on this little line for the fold. Now, if you're putting on a 110-pound cardstock, you may want to consider, or not 110, 120, even with 110, you may want to consider what's called a double score. This means that it kind of counts for the paper thickness. Now that we know this is dead center of that card, so I'm going to keep it where it is. But I'm going to Alt drag, which is copy and paste, this just above itself and just below itself, like so. Now it looks like one big solid line. And I'm going to delete, let me hide the two I just created, I'm going to delete this middle one. So here's what I have. This is a double score. It'll draw a score on both of these. It'll make it a little easier to fold, and the fold will stay folded down a little bit better and not spring up. The sample I provided in class is a single score on that thick 120-pound paper stock, and it wants to spring up. I don't know if you noticed that. It just doesn't want to stay shut. And if you do a double score, basically what it does is you fold on two of these lines, and it stays shut much better. Normally I would measure the micrometer. In micrometers, the thickness of the paper, but I'm just going to, just close like this is fine. Now these are not compound paths. These are considered paths. So you want to go to Object, Compound Path, and make those two compound paths as well. The cutter cannot deal with regular paths. It cannot deal with grouped things. It cannot deal with anything except for merged things that are then compound pathed. Okay? Now I can't merge these because these are not overlapping. So I have two layers, and they are both black. One is a compound, one is for the cutting, so I'm going to call this the cut file, and the other one's the score, which I'm going to call the score file. And I would definitely recommend you do that whenever you're, excuse me, I'm going to rename this layer, whenever you are setting up your file, so that way I know what is what, because it's not always obvious. Okay? Now what I would do is I would take these objects and I would drag them to their position that you need them. Now if you're designing with bleeds, make sure you have a little space between these. I'm also going to move them roughly to the center of the layout. You definitely want things centered. That way when you're designing and InDesign too, you need to do this first before you can even do the InDesign stuff. Because you need to know where to position your designs in InDesign in the first place. Because this file in Illustrator has to match your InDesign file. Or you could design in Illustrator and have that be a third layer. And just turn the layer off whenever we're dealing with cut files. So here we have 3 business cards up. And I'm going to get several of them down as well. So on a 12 by 18, it looks like I might be able to get as many as 14 cards out of here. I'm sorry, 15. 15 cards. Now, I did leave room for bleed. And I left room for the white area that it doesn't print on the outside. And I'm going to save this just as my AI file for now. I'm going to call it Wavy Business Card Design. You know, to make it simple on myself, I'm a big, huge, gigantic InDesign freak. I love it. But to make it easy on myself, I would actually design the card here in Illustrator and put it in its own layer. Because jumping between InDesign and Illustrator, you know, at least you know if you're in Illustrator the whole time, it's lined up. An Illustrator, with it being a business card, it's not like you're doing a multiple page document. So, and it's just a small thing, you know, your business card, not a very big object. So I would say if you're going to do something like this, go ahead and do it in Illustrator. Now you'll see that I have multiple compound paths now. How do you think the cutter's going to work with that? It's not very well. So now I need to grab all of these score items. So they all stayed in that layer, luckily. I clicked on that layer's target, or its selected area, and I'm going to go to Object, Compound Path, and make that one compound path. I'm going to do the same thing with the cut file. Object, Compound Path, and make. There we go. Now this conceivably is ready to save. I'm going to go ahead and save it as 2 separate files. Now, I would like to have just had this as one file, 2 layers, but my machine the software is not developed well enough for that to happen. So I'm going to turn off the cut file layer, and I'm only going to have the score file layer open. Now, before I get too excited here, I need to give both on the score file or the score layer and the cut file, I need to give the cut machine, something to register these 2 layers by. So what I'm going to do is in the upper left-hand corner, I am going to simply create a little plus sign. 1 point rule is fine. And I am going to copy and paste that, rotate it, holding down the Shift key. Oops. Let's get it up here where I can see it. And I'm going to do a little crisscross like this. Now this right now is on the cut file, it looks like, because I'm on the cut file layer. I want to go ahead and definitely compound path that. Everything has to be a compound path. And then I have to select everything on this layer and compound path it together. Oh yeah, great. Lots of compound pathing. There we go. Now this guy, he's still noticeable. Let me make sure he's got some, oh, he's barely noticeable. So let me go ahead and stroke him with black. There we go. Now this, oops, these all need to be filled with black. What happened there? Pardon me. That shouldn't have happened, but we'll do it anyway. Oh, I know what it did. It adopted the it adopts the attributes of the topmost object. So that was a stroke, so it's adopting that. So I'm just going to unstroke it and fill it, and it's still all a compound path, so we're okay. All right, so it definitely needs to be filled with black. Okay, I'm just running across an issue now. It keeps on stroking these black objects, so I'm gonna undo quite a bit, and I'm gonna tell you how to avoid this problem. I'm going to undo the paint style, undo compound path. Because these are lines and not shapes, it's giving me this problem. So here's what I need to do. I need to choose these and turn them into actual objects and shapes, not something that's stroked. So you can outline a stroke path by going to Object, Path, and Outline Stroke. Now it is filled with black, and it's not going to give me such a hard time. So let me compound path that. Now we'll compound path the entire layer, and it should not give me the outline because I'm not dealing with stroked objects anymore. There, yay. Always problems, right? Always some problems. Just make sure your little plus sign is somewhere inside of that 12 by 18. Make sure it's not in a non-printable area. So I'm moving him in a little bit. Now I'm going to copy him, Command C or Control C, and I'm going to turn this layer off, and I'm going to click on my score file, and I'm going to go to Edit, Paste in Place. It'll be in exactly the identical position as it is on my cut file. Now, of course, it's a separate path, so I have to compound path that stuff again. Okay. Oh, and you know what we're having a problem with? These are strokes. Oh, darn it. And it stroked my little cross. It put a stroke around there. Oh, man. So I'm going to Control Z that again. So the lesson learned today is we need to make sure that anything that is a stroke is turned into a path by outlining the stroke. Then we won't have such a problem. So outline your strokes, then you can make your compound path. There we go. This should not have changed. There, no, it's good now. So instead of using strokes, you can use strokes, but then you have to convert the stroke to an outline. Okay, this little cross right here allows me to manually, unfortunately, register your score file to your cut file. Now the machine has a camera on it, but the camera feature is not working yet. They don't have that software fixed yet. So I have to manually register those. Okay, so I have two layers. One is a score file. It has one compound path. The other is a cut file, one compound path. You don't want multiple paths. I could have a third layer that has all my design work on it, but I would be turning that off and not using it for the cut machine. All right, now here's the next thing you need to do. You need to provide me with two Illustrator files, one for the cut and one for the score. And here's how you would do that. You would turn off the cut file, and you'd leave the score file open. And you would go to File, Save As, and you would say Wavy Business Card Score. Oops, I can't spell score. And you would put that wherever you need to, and you keep it as an AI file. Don't bother making an SVG file. The AI file is working just fine. I was going through the extra process of making an SVG, but I have third-party software that I make the SVG file with because the cutter can only cut SVG files. But I have to import it won't go cut directly from Illustrator, so I have to import this AI file into a different software I have at home called Make the Cut. So I'm just saving it as an Illustrator file and calling it the score file. I'm going to turn that layer off and turn on the cut file and go to File, Save As, and I'm going to name this one Cut. And save it. Now, you would hand me these two files, plus you would give me a stack of printed material. That is from the same file. And everything, all of your the design part would be all aligned over this this wavy stuff or whatever custom shape you have. So you would have a third layer that would have been turned off during this process. And I don't really care about the print layer, just that it needs to align perfectly with these other layers. If they don't, then this is not going to work. But basically all I need is these two files. I need the wavy business card cut file and the wavy business card score file. Okay, so that is a business card. Now before we were talking about this. All I need on a name, and maybe you have some special shape, all I need is everything to be filled with black with a compound path. Make sure if anything's stroked, the stroke is outlined. And you can save this as whatever you want to call it, Rebecca name cut vinyl. If you want it cut vinyl, just call it cut vinyl so I know. And I just save that, and that's all I need there. So this was the easy one. I forgot to tell you just to save it, but as long as you have it as a compound path in one layer, no multiple paths. And if I had other objects that needed in here, such as maybe I wanted some sort of swooshy graphic going around my name because I'm just like, so swishy. So maybe this is, the energy I want on mine. Of course, I wouldn't have this wonky of a curve, but let's say this curve is something that is interacting with my name that I also want in cut vinyl. Well, if it's a separate path, that's not going to work out very well. So grab everything and make it a compound path. And then I can save this and this will all come out in cut vinyl. Now, if you wanted the swoosh a different color of vinyl than the name, well, that's a whole separate file. So you might want to design it as one, but then copy and paste this or turn off a layer. Maybe this is in its own layer, and then provide me two different Illustrator files. Just let me know. I would say name them specifically. Rebecca name black, swish red, but don't color the swish red. If you color the swish red, the cutter may not understand what's going on. It doesn't understand color. It just understands shapes. So don't color things red. Just tell me, rename your file. So the name part would be Rebecca name black, and then turn that layer off and have the swish be its own compound path and have it be called swish red. And as long as they're the same size as what your document is, it should come out. It won't shrink it or enlarge it or do anything crazy. Okay, so I just shared with you how to, one, create your name in the event that you wanted to do some cut vinyl, how to convert it to outlines and then compound path it. Here I don't need the little plus sign for registration because you're going to just place it on your, whatever you're going to place it on. This one is a lot more complicated, but in the event that you wanted some sort of funky card, you could do that. The last thing I'd like to show is if you wanted to do stickers. I have the sticker paper. The sticker paper is 8.5 by 11. So I'm going to go ahead and choose letter size. And this would be a sticker. And the sticker is pretty much the same thing. I know I had a light bulb shape. That was the example that I had given to you guys in class. So I'm going to create a pretty ugly light bulb shape here. Nothing pretty. A half of a light bulb, actually. And maybe this is going to be some custom mailing label. And clearly I would have probably a light bulb design inside of there printed. So you would give me something that was printed with the light bulb and then maybe the names of somebody in there. So this is just the outline. Well, this needs to be filled with black, no stroke. And this would just be, right now it's just a path, but it needs to be compound pathed. And if you want multiples of them, you would then want to pull them down. You can have the design on here too. Pull them down, grab them all, and compound path them as one. Just remember that when you copy and paste something, you have to compound path them all together. I just save this as sticker, save as Rebecca stickers. That way I know what I'm cutting on. and as an AI file, and that was super easy. But you have to align your design and have it already printed beforehand. So you may, this is at least a 2-part process. You'll have these layers turned off when you're printing, but you'll have a separate layer with your design on it. So when you're printing, turn that layer off unless you have a solid color. But this guy is going to be the cut file, and I would rename it as such, cut file. Okay, so if you're doing custom stickers, I would go and don't have me cut right on the edge of something. Give me a little white border, because since I'm manually registering things, that can be a little tricky for me to get perfectly on the edge. So you know, if you do want something going to the edge, make sure that whatever that color is has a pretty good tolerance for me to slightly be off, you know, as much as a 1/16 of an inch. All right, so that's it. Stickers, business cards, both cut and score file, which is for folding, and name and vinyl. That's about all I can do right now on that machine. All right, any questions? All right, so you have some options. I might even bring the machine in if it gets too hairy scary, because taking it home, because I'm going to be taking your stuff home and doing it at home, and if I can kill it here while I'm here, that would be great, and give you a little bit more instant service and just be done with it and not have to take work home with me. That would be really nice. I'd rather stay after and work here than take it home sometimes. So there you go. Oh, I better